everyone. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 68 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health. Today, we continue our study of the oversight of medical devices, breast implant registry, with a 2-hour panel to hear from patient advocates. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23rd, 2022. Just a few comments for the benefit of witnesses. For those participating virtually, I guess Ms. Pratt, just make sure that you mute yourself when you're not speaking. You've got interpretation there on the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. Please don't take any screenshots or photos of the screen. The proceedings today will be made available via the House of Commons website. In accordance with our routine motion, I'm informing the committee that all remote participants have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. I'd now like to welcome the witnesses who have joined us today in the room from the Breast Implant Safety Alliance. We have Julie Elliott and Terry McGregor. And online from the Breast Implant Failure and Illness Society Canada, Nancy Pratt. Thank you all for taking the time to appear today. We're going to start with Ms. Elliott. Vous aurez 5 minutes pour une allocation.
You'll have 5 minutes for your opening statement. The floor is now yours. Mr. Terrio and members, thank you for your invitation. My name is Julie Elliott, and my story is important because I have been negatively affected by breast implants. My story is not important because it's the same as that of thousands of other women. We can address the extended community of women negatively affected by breast implants on social media. There are more than 250 support groups worldwide with over 350,000 members identifying as having BII or potentially having cancer caused by implants. The Quebec support group for these women was founded following the CBC report Enquête danger sous la peau. Overnight, Miss Elliott, could you please speak a little bit slower for the interpreters? If you need an additional minute, you'll get it. The Quebec support group for these women was founded following the CBC report Enquête danger sous la peau. Overnight, it became a primary source of information about breast implants. Let me give you some examples. On March 4, 2019, an article in La Presse said that 15,000 women with textured implants in Quebec will be contacted by the authorities. However, 4 years later, the majority of them have never been contacted. Many of them are breast cancer survivors who have undergone post-mastectomy reconstruction with textured implants. These women have never been contacted by the public health facility where they underwent their reconstruction and learned this news on an informal platform held by women who are also negatively affected by breast implants. A few rare surgeons have taken the initiative to contact their patients to offer to meet and discuss with them the impacts of textured implants on their health. In Quebec, Dr. Stephen Nicolaitis is one of them. This example raises an extremely important point in creating an implant registry, the mandatory legal retention period for patients' medical records, and the responsibility for information sharing. In Quebec, thousands of patients who have had breast implants are unable to find information about their surgery or their implants because of the 5-year retention period for medical records. In comparison, British Columbia has a retention period of 16 years. You will find the graph of the mandatory retention periods for medical records for each province in Canada in the addendum. Another example is the recall of breast implants from the manufacturer Mentor in 2022 by Health Canada, which was ignored and which was not the subject of any public communication. Found by chance, this reminder was posted on a Facebook group page. Women came forward, outraged to learn that they were carrying faulty implants, and that if it had not been for the vigilance of the members of the group, the news would never have been the news would have been passed over in silence. A registry would have alerted these patients the same way it would have alerted women with biocell implants earlier than 2019 in Canada and the United States. Let's not forget that the ANMS issued a recall in December 2018 for these same implants, and that a register was set up in 2019. A national registry of implants would alleviate these problems. Right now, it's us, the patients, who are working to ensure that members of support groups on social media have the correct scientific and official information. We are the ones who translate the most recent Anglophone, mostly American, press releases for the benefit of Francophone women. You will understand, dear committee members, that our platforms have literally served as a registry for our members since 2018 and literally do the work that the government and public health agencies do not. However, these women must find us. It is an absolutely abnormal situation that puts us in the crosshairs of doctors and surgeons, and we are constantly the subjects of their condescension, both in person and on social media. Do we really need to remember that public health agencies are responsible for the safety, approval, and warnings of health products? They're responsible for the safety, approval, and warnings. A computer database for mandatory declaration of the implementation of a high-risk medical product, linking the public health agency, the manufacturer, the purchasers, hospital center and private practice, and the patients is the only possible way for all participants to have the same information at the same time. This registry is part of the safety and warning system for medical implants. It is an integral part of the process of accepting a health product and goes hand in hand with a precautionary principle. In Canada, the main manufacturers of breast implants are Allergan and Mentor. No matter where these implants are licensed, distributed, or sold, they're all manufactured using the same formula, the same ingredients, the same process, in the same facilities. Only the delivery points differ. Mentor implants come from California and the Netherlands. Allergan implants come from Costa Rica and Ireland, and they are distributed worldwide. You will find a partial list of compounds and ingredients in the addendum. If a manufacturer experiences problems, let's cite the example of Allergan, which account for 85% of BIA-ALCL cases worldwide, all the countries where the implants have been distributed are concerned. It is therefore logical to think that if a health agency decides to warn a manufacturer to proceed with a recall or to ban a product for safety reasons, the agencies of all the countries where this product is distributed should automatically issue the same warning at the same time. Despite the borders, it's human bodies that receive the same implant, and these humans have the right to receive this information immediately and at the same time. In the same way that car manufacturers immediately contact all the dealers where their vehicles are sold when there's a problem or a recall, it will only take a few days between the moment an automobile problem is raised by the manufacturer and the moment when my dealer will contact me to fix the problem, at their expense for my safety and their reputation. In Canada, the law requires it where the problem is minor or major. Only a breast implant registry can put us on the same levels as the vehicles we drive. Thank you very much. And I'd like to table these documents for the committee. Thank you very much, Ms. Elliott.
Yours, Ms. McGregor, for the next 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the committee for today's invitation to testify with the aim of improving patient outcomes. It has been 8 years since I was introduced to the true risk profile of breast implants with my stage 4 diagnosis of BIA-ALCL. We do this grueling and unpaid work in an effort to raise patient-centric perspective amongst the giants of industry who continue to successfully control the narrative, mislead consumers, and leverage the emotional plight of breast reconstruction and our prophylactic mastectomy patients. A national registry will directly impact health outcomes for patients if and only if its architecture and oversight includes accountability. Will there be consequences for not doing what's required? Auditability. Will the data be subject to audit by neutral party so that we will know and be able to vet its credibility? And lastly, accessibility. Will advocacy groups, patients, and doctors have free access to the data so we can protect patients from misleading information? The devil is in the deep dive details, and I empathize with the confusion and complexity of the committee members attempting to wrap their comprehension around a 60-year culture of mismanagement and contradictions. We are here to help. We are subject experts, we are solution-driven, and can provide robust recommendations and resources if we are included in the planning stages. We trust that a robust opt-out registry can deliver real-time, real-world outcomes and address issues sooner, in addition to the standard track and trace for notifications. Who controls the data, controls the process, and controls the reported outcomes? The effects of undue influence permeate our existing registries, specifically the Canadian Device Registry I was given in 2009, the Canadian Adverse Event Reporting, the NBIR, and the Profile Registry for ALCL patients. My lived experience with Health Canada's registry is evidence of the denial and delay tactics of undue influence. Industry has succeeded to date, and the consequences have been disastrous not only to patients. We bear witness to the slander campaign directed at plastic surgeons who do not bend to the peer influence of their thought leaders. What actions did manufacturers take to notify patients in 2011? Why didn't Health Canada invoke their authority and demand patients be notified in 2011? What punitive consequences has Health Canada issued against device manufacturers who intentionally withheld our BIA ALCL cancer report to our government? Blind willfulness is the only reasonable conclusion for implanting surgeons whose self-promoting websites are riddled with misleading, stale-dated, and simply false statements. Commerce without ethical context is dangerous and continues to harm patients. I have provided a link just for your interest. Why do we not have answers to rudimentary questions? How many Canadians have breast implants? How many Canadians are affected by the recalled product? Simply put, we cannot manage what we don't measure. Our recommendations include adopt a breast MRI recommendation for implant surveillance in Canada. Require that breast implant patients be notified for the need of a breast MRI. Pause or limit the sale of breast implants until an effective registry is created. Require participation of patients.
Juste un moment, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, could you please just slow down a bit? Because it's difficult to do the interpretation. As the chair said earlier, you'll have a lot of time. If you go over your 5-minute, you'll still have time. So just please slow down the pace of speaking.
Interpreters are having a hard time keeping up with you, so if you slow down, we'll give you a couple more minutes.
I'll
if you
slow
need it.
down.
Okay, thank
So
you.
I'm not sure where to pick up, but adopting breast MRI recommendations are critical for Canadians because that is completely contradictory to both the manufacturers and the FDA's recommendations. So we suggest that we pause or limit the sale of breast implants until an effective registry can be created. Require participation of breast advocates in developing a registry as well as its administration. Pause or limit the sale of breast implants until there is a full investigation of the regulatory failures and manufacturer violations, including failure to report injuries and harm, and the failure to meet the approval conditions put forward by this committee in 2006. The impact of BIA, ALCL, and other implant-associated injuries on our healthcare system, including the financial burden. The impact on Canadians who cannot access knowledgeable healthcare for accurate evaluation, accurate pathology testing, and treatment for our malignancies. The shortcomings of the current mandatory reporting system and misleading marketing by breast implants. We also ask you to extend mandatory adverse event reporting to include private practice breast clinics. We also suggest we prohibit manufacturers from selling implants to doctors that fail to provide informed consent. If manufacturers fail to monitor such doctors with oversight, impose consequences that risk their license to sell implants, include photos depicting breast implant adverse events on Health Canada's website, and lastly, assess the burden placed on our provincial health care for the sick and injured implant patients. It is unreasonable that device manufacturers and private practice breast clinics profit, leaving the wreckage of health costs to our provinces. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McGregor. Next, from the Breast Implant Failure and Illness Society Canada, appearing online, Nancy Pratt. Welcome to the committee. Ms. Pratt, you have the floor.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for your interest in the creation of a breast implant registry. I'm a patient advocate with a lived experience of unknowingly having recalled breast implants. Recently, longtime women's advocate Anne Rochon Ford, now retired, sent me her files saved over decades. Reading through them, I felt disheartened, frustrated, and angry because we're still fighting for the same safety issues today as they were back then in the early 1990s. The questions and concerns have been present for a long time. The fears of the risk of cancer have come true. We shouldn't still have to fight so hard for safety and tracking measures for devices that carry Health Canada's highest risk rating and have known serious issues ranging from device failures to localized complications, the impact of silicone migration, autoimmune systemic illnesses, and now a known link to cancer, deaths, and recalls. In 2004, a bill to establish a breast implant registry was introduced in the House. How different the situation would be if that had occurred. The result has been wasted decades, leaving Canadians with having to give consent without a clear understanding of the risks they're taking on. Health Canada licensed breast implants despite having no long-term safety data, without a protocol of care in place, and no one keeping track. Over decades, we've seen that industry claims of safety and incidents of harm have been misrepresented. Implanting Class 4 medical devices without keeping track demonstrates disregard for patient safety. Those profiting from breast implants have deflected responsibility for tracking them. Continuing to do nothing simply isn't an option. It's not fair that the Canadian public continue to be sold devices where concerns are not systematically being tracked, researched, and evaluated. I strongly support the establishment of a public mandatory registry. This will assist in post-marketing research and create a system to help contact people if needed. Many implantations are done in private for-profit clinics and increasingly through medical tourism. It's important that physicians are required to register the implantations done in Canada, and people who received implants elsewhere can register themselves. CIHR should be funded to undertake this project. Since the 2019 recall of textured implants linked to BIA-ALCL, many affected Canadians are still unaware of the recall. This is unacceptable. Implant wearers of previous decades were similarly unaware of recalls. It's resulted in unnecessary harm and lives lost. Canadians with breast implants bear the consequences of inadequate oversight without device tracking. Nobody should ever be unaware that a device implanted within them has been recalled or carries a safety warning. A registry is but one part of the solution. We need directed research dollars to answer the myriad of questions people's experiences with silicone have raised. There are many, many questions that need answering. This is not a role for the industry, given their history and their obvious conflict of interest. We hope this time a registry will be created and public research on breast implants funded. It will save lives and illness. We're at a time parallel to the 1990s moratorium. If there's no resolve at this point for creating a breast implant registry, then perhaps it's time to hit the pause button and withdraw breast implants from the Canadian market until a registry is created. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pratt. We're now going to begin with rounds of questions, starting with the Conservatives. Dr. Ellis for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, and certainly to the witnesses, I want to thank you for being here, and also to be very clear that if I ask any questions, and I probably speak for everybody at this committee, that seem personal in nature, it's with our understanding that you have shared your own medical stories out there already. Am I correct in saying that with everybody?
Absolutely, for me, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
again,
absolutely.
it's not like we're going to ask, significant medical questions. Don't hold back. Well, thank you. And I appreciate that, and thank you all for being here. I mean, there's so many questions and so little time. A few questions about the registry itself. I thought I heard two different things, one from Ms. McGregor and one from Ms. Pratt. So maybe I'll start with Ms. McGregor through you, Chair. I heard about an opt-out registry, and I thought I heard Ms. Pratt say a mandatory registry. So maybe I'll start with Ms. McGregor, and then we'll go to Ms. Pratt, if you could talk a bit about that.
Right, so I'll qualify that I'm not a registry expert, but I think what we've heard from this committee in previous meetings, it must be mandated and what I believe is called an opt-out. If you really don't want your information there, you have to make a lot of efforts to get it out, because we see the poor participation, for example, in MBIR. So
Okay.
hopefully that
Thank
clarifies.
you. And Ms. Pratt, do you agree with that, or do you see it somewhat slightly differently?
I totally agree. Absolutely.
Okay. And do we have any numbers from around the world? And I understand all of you have traveled extensively to tell of your difficulties that you've had around the world. Do we have any numbers, if we have an opt-out registry, that how many people would actually opt out of it? I guess I have a concern, if the opt-out numbers are 50%, wow, we'll have a huge issue. Any idea of those numbers?
I don't, but what I could do is draw your attention to the fine print in the NBIR, the U.S. registry. And I will tell you, as a citizen in 2023, where, that fear of privacy and data being hijacked, I thought they went a little bit too in detail, because after I read the instructions for data, that thought that my data could be sold to a third party sometime in the future, undisclosed to me, I will tell you that skeptically would have said, really? Like, I want my government to have it and regulatory bodies, but this sort of blanket, we can sell it to anybody at any time in the future, I would just suggest that any kind of opt-out language is far more specific, and that sort of trigger that, that general fear of hacking that occurs today.
Right, and I guess through you, Chair, it makes sense. We become fearful when we hear that someone's going to sell our data for their own gain. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
Right. And to an unknown party at any time in the future. That, to me, is just far too broad stroke.
Thank you for that. And through you, Chair, maybe I'll ask all three of the witnesses this particular question. Maybe they all have the same answer, I don't know. But who should pay for the registry? Certainly, I think one of the hesitancies we see around this table perhaps is related to how much is it going to cost the government. I think we need to understand that particular aspect of this. But the question is, who should pay? Do we think, should manufacturers pay? Should the government pay the full shot? Should it be a shared payment model? Should patients pay? And if you, all three of you could comment on that, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll start with that. And my first thought would be to reframe that question and say we're already paying. Like, I do not know what it cost to treat me at Princess Margaret through multiple chemotherapies, my stem cell transplant, and like I'm continuing on six-month follow-ups. And what we know is that Canadians, in the study, a study we talked about from Lorraine Greaves and Nancy can talk to, Canadian breast implant wearers go to their physician 4 times more often than non-implant wearers. And we suspect that's because of these systemic issues that don't directly point to a breast implant, and it's just that constant routine of, family physician to referral, we can't see evidence and back. So I would suggest the infrastructure is already there because we're paying for it, and we are in complete support of a user fee. If we can do it for tires in Ontario, let's do it with breast implants.
Ms. Elliott, do you have a different comment or the same?
Seconde totalement qu'est-ce.
I second what has just been said. If I base myself on the Canadian Joint Registry, if I'm not mistaken, it's funded by Health Canada and 2 other organizations. To go back to what Ms. McGregor was saying with regarding societal costs for cancer, personally, I haven't had BIA, but I've had the systemic problems resulting from an implant. And this occurred in the month following my implant operation, and it lasted for 10 years. And when the enquête journalist from Radio-Canada prepared the documentary on Danger sous la peau, I gave him the permission to get all the data regarding my medical issue and all of the costs charged to the health facilities from the time where I got the implant, as well as a comparative period of about 5 years prior to the implant. In the 5 years prior to the implant, it was extremely rare for me to go and see a doctor or go to a hospital, but it became a routine affair. In the first few weeks following the implant, over a 10-year period, so the total costs, including the loss in salary and the money that I spent in visiting various professionals, and then the charges to the health facility to see various experts, regardless of specialty, we can talk about a total cost because personally, it was more difficult for me to know how much exactly I spent. We're talking about $50,000. So $250,000 came out of my own pocket. The rest, and there was salary lost, and the rest of the cost was borne by society.
Ça, c'est tout le temps, Louis.
That's all the time we have for this round, but there will be a lot more questions to follow, and you'll have a chance to elaborate further.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to our committee. Thank you for sharing your experience with us, and thank you for the advocacy that you're doing. And I'm sorry that you have the experience that you've had. And once again, thank you for your advocacy. I'm going to start with Madame Pratt. In the last meeting that we had, committee meeting that we had, I asked Dr. Morris and as well as Dr. Cohen on medical tourism. And Madam Pratt, you also highlighted the fact that medical tourism is trending and is becoming more prevalent. What are your thoughts around how can we incentivize those who choose to do breast augmentation through the venue of medical tourism to ensure that they would register in such a registry?
I'm not an expert on this, but I think there has to be a way to reach them. so that, when they've had their procedure done in another country and they come back to Canada, if their doctors are educated, and they should be, Health Canada should do an outreach to the colleges so that there's a standard care in place. So the doctors, their family doctors, would be aware to notify them, to let them know that the registry exists, and that it would be a good idea if they registered.
Actually, thank you. So what you're suggesting is patients, most of the patients have a family doctor, and through their family doctor,
No.
education plays a big role in ensuring that they register. Sorry, you said no, so can you clarify?
Well, to the point of saying that everybody, has a family doctor, that's not true. There are so many Canadians, including myself, who don't have a family doctor. So if we're calling into a virtual clinic, even the doctors through those clinics should be, sort of updated through the college for this standard protocol of care, and be aware and advise the patient. I guess the problem with that would be if they presented to a virtual doctor and it wasn't for an issue specific to their surgery, the virtual doctor might not know. So
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Madam Elliott. You talked about that there are basically two large manufacturers, and the onus is on them. So I really want to spend the rest of the time that I have on participation. My colleague, Dr. Alice, talked about what percentage is really needed by participation, whether it's the patient, whether it's the doctors, whether it's the surgeon, whether it's the clinic, and whether it's the provinces. What type of, in numbers has been thrown around, 90%, 95% participation by patients and doctors are needed. I believe there was a discussion on opt-out. How do we incentivize the patients as well as the doctors, as far as the clinics, to ensure that they do not opt out?
If you're asking me the question, the opt-out should not be an option.
So you're
It
making
should
you're
not.
suggesting
But that-
mandatory.
Yes.
Okay, so now we've got a registry system that serves all the purposes that we've set. It's mandatory, and we have somehow built the agreement across all the stakeholders, whether it's the province, whether it's the federal government, the patient, the doctors, the manufacturers, all of those things to come in. What would happen if someone decide to go outside of the country and get that procedure done and chooses not to inform?
Well, I mean, that's the problem. And the problem is, first off the country, if you go medical tourism, a lot of countries that are popular right now, they're using breast implants that are not even manufactured here. I've talked personally to plastic surgeons that right now are doing a business in Montreal, removing breast implants or taking care of post-op complication from patients that went outside the country, like outside North America, to have their, breast augmentation, liposuction surgery, what have you. So that would be like the first problem, because most of the time they're getting breast implants or other type of cosmetic implants that are not even regulated here. But we're in 2023. There should be a way for whoever has any kind of implants, if you come back here and you have this type of implants, you're coming back with some information on your implants. There's a registry. You should be able to put those numbers in any kind of registry. And I think that probably Terry would be way more, efficient than me to answer that question.
Yeah, just, as somebody who ran a business for a long time, looking for 100% accuracy in this database, like that is an unrealistic expectation. Canadians who choose medical tourism, that is an outlier percentage, and it is minor. Do we give that patient an option or their surgeon that when they land back in Canada and they have a problem, that somebody can populate that data? Yes. But medical tourism is an issue. It is far greater an issue, in Taiwan and Australia. At some point, we're not going to capture 100%, but 100% is better than the 0% we're collecting today.
Thank you, Ms. McGregor. Monsieur Thériault, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Terrio, 6 minutes. With respect to medical tourism, we hear about this a lot. The advantage is probably an economic one. However, if there was an advantage, that of safety with breast implants, they wouldn't go elsewhere. So we have to be responsible. We have to provide some value add so that people will get operated here, and that would justify the cost associated with the procedure. That's my opinion. You can tell me whether you agree or not. I have a question for Ms. Pratt, who is appearing virtually. I just want to bring her back into the forum. I questioned Health Canada about its lack of proactivity. I asked Dr. Greaves during a meeting back in February of 2021, and I'd asked this person for any recommendations that the advisory committee had made if things had been progressing. And her answer was no, nothing's been done. I can see from your documents that you have sent a letter to Health Canada and to the advisory committee, and this is going back to 2022. You talked about progress achieved with respect to these recommendations. Did you get any answer back?
I didn't get a response. No. It's concerning.
Comment vous expliquez que
How do you explain the fact that Health Canada, that says it's being proactive, that with great fanfare has set up a scientific advisory committee, holds one meeting where we talk about where they talked about breast implants, makes recommendations, but since then nothing's been done. You did some follow-up in 23, and you haven't got any answer back. How can you explain this situation? Are you a little bit discouraged?
Absolutely. It's hard not to be discouraged sometimes as an advocate, but certainly Health Canada has done minimal sort of changes to this point. And so even things like a black box warning and our request to put photos of failed breast implants on their website, the website itself isn't as informative as it should be. But I want to draw attention to the fact that even though there have been some actions taken, in our letter we wrote asking what substantive changes have been made. The really important issues are ignored. The sort of inconvenient truth issues of breast implants, like migrated silicone and sort of issues that the chemicals in breast implants that they don't want to take on. And so these changes that are happening, and not to a good degree, it's not really, to me, it's not really making women any safer than they were, back decades ago. And so they need to address these issues.
Vous demandiez dans cette...
In this letter, you asked whether Health Canada could provide more information to women, add photos showing what silicone implants can look at and how the silicone can migrate. Because in the report, in the enquête report, we see this famous plastic surgeon who cuts a silicone implant in half, and he says this couldn't circulate through the body of a woman. Has Health Canada put these photos on the website, just like we do with other things?
No, they haven't pursued those actions. And the Scientific Advisory Committee made some really great recommendations to Health Canada, and they haven't been pursued either. So it's really troubling.
La migration de...
Silicone migration, is this a proven fact?
Yes, absolutely. So all breast implants bleed silicone and chemicals. So you've got that even if an implant is still intact, it's bleeding silicone. So sometimes a wearer might have their implants removed and they've got silicone uptake in lymph nodes or in surrounding tissue. But then there's also the issue of when rupture occurs. And if it's not diagnosed in time and with no standard protocol of care in place, it's very often not diagnosed in time. There can be silicone that migrates outside of the capsule that surrounds the breast implant and goes into the body. And I can speak to this because that's something that I've experienced. And just to draw to the point, when yesterday there was a comment that silicone is inert. And I guarantee you that anybody who has migrated silicone within them will not agree that silicone is inert. I have pain, as do they, in every place where that silicone is migrated within us.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pratt. Mr. Davies, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. It's fascinating testimony. Ms. McGregor, you used the term true risk profile. Are Canadian women, in your view, receiving from their surgeons at the time they're considering implants the true risk profile of breast implants?
There's very few absolute answers, and I can absolutely answer, absolutely not. Okay. And the true risk profile, what we talk about, slick marketing, and, I have a link to some board-certified plastic surgeons who are also on the executive committee of the thought leaders of their societies. And when I read their professional website today, it talks about, don't worry, little lady, if you get cancer from these implants, because it's not really a big deal. It is 100% curable, and that no ALCL patient has ever needed chemotherapy or radiation. And so what I can tell you is that when I read in 2023, last week, and I read the blatant misinformation, inaccurate, and quite honestly, patients are using these these fancy, pretty websites that appear with some, half marketing, half medical. But if I was a patient using that surgeon's website, I would walk away thinking not only that false information, but how dangerous that is. And this is where patients have no power and no control. And, I'm also not in a position to want to put myself in some kind of campaign to now being sued by plastic surgeons, because I will say in our social media support groups, we've already had threatening letters from surgeons who disagree with the harm patients. And, so we're just a lot of volunteers who,
Right.
for some reason, and now we're getting letters of threatening legal action.
Ms. Elliott, in an August 20th, 2019 article from Black Press Media, you noted that many plastic surgeons aren't trained to administer explants, a riskier, more complex surgery than implants, and even if they are, they don't always believe patient concerns. You were quoted as saying, a lot of surgeons are trying to convince us or themselves that you don't actually need to remove your breast implants in order to get better. They say if you're sick, it's not because of your implants, it's everything else but your implants. How common do you think that situation is, and what is the role of surgeons, do you think, in this issue?
How common? Extremely common. See, part of the problem is when you get breast implants, you go see a plastic surgeon. When you get problems after your surgery, most of the time, you're not going to go back to see your plastic surgeon and say, hey, I feel sick. If you have post-surgical problems, complication, of course, you're going to go back to the person who did surgery on you. But when the post-op period, the healing period is, of the actual surgery is done, you're going to go back to see your GP or whatever else specialist your case is going to need attention for. Most of the time, plastic surgeon, if you go back to see them, are going to tell you it's not your implants. It's anything else. You're going to see specialists. If you tell them, I think my breast implants are causing this and this, if it's not a mechanical problem caused by the implants, most of the time because of the capsular contraction, they're almost never are going to tell you, I think it may be your breast implants.
Thank you. Ms. Pratt, in an April 2023 article from CBC News, you noted that a breast implant registry shouldn't be limited to implants, but should also include other materials like mesh and clips that may also be placed inside the body during implant surgery. Can you expand on that?
Absolutely. Everything that's placed in the body should be recorded in the registry. And so what's happening now is that with the recall of textured implants, plastic surgeons, many of them, are taking smooth implants and they're using mesh, which is not approved for use in surgery in breast. So they're using it off-label as regulators turn a blind eye. And mesh, as it's been in the news getting coverage for the difficulties that it's created. It's a high-risk device. It has complications. And so now they're cavalierly using this mesh in patients, and often they don't know. Patients don't often have an understanding of what's going into them. So it's not appropriate to just follow the implant, but then later, if the patient has an issue that's mesh related and there's a recall on that mesh, but they can't be notified. They can be notified about the breast implant, but not about the mesh.
We had some witnesses earlier this week on Tuesday, and there was a little bit of a difference of opinion, I think. One person was very clear that there were very concrete links between breast implant illness, BIALCL, and autoimmune disorders and breast implants. And the other witness, I at least detected that he sort of made it seem like it's not so clearly established. I want to know your opinion on that. How clear is the evidence of illnesses linked to breast implants, in your view?
Okay, so we're
Still to me?
we're out of time, but we'd like to have a brief response, please. Who's it directed to, Mr. Davies?
Directed to anybody that wanted to answer, but maybe Ms. McGregor can.
Okay, Ms. McGregor, a brief response, please.
I don't live in a litigious country, but what I can tell you is that the fear of litigation has not been discussed so far at this hearing, and that's all I'm going to suggest. The fear of litigation to these plastic surgeons is significant and serious and not being discussed.
Thank you. Mr. Generou, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to kind of bounce around a little bit, but first on the litigation piece, that there, due to a lot of the lack of evidence, I would think, because there is no registry, I would hope would mitigate some of that. And I'm sorry that you're going through that, Ms. McGregor. I think Ms. Pratt made a very a significant point that didn't really think of until she made it, or I guess was part of her testimony, was the other items included as part of this, the mesh and the clips that you'd indicated in your testimony, Ms. Pratt, I think are also something that we haven't heard yet at this committee, and is something that I know as we write our report and recommendations is something I suspect would be important to consider. Quickly, Mr. Chair, we've had a lot of testimony here about the need for the registry, and again, I go back to a point I've made before. This has been ongoing since 2004, and it appears to me this isn't a partisan issue at all. I firmly believe a lot of us around this table are supportive of the registry. It's just a matter of where the registry is housed and kind of the logistics of the registry. Some of this has been pointed to CIHR and what the orthopedic registry is. We have yet to hear from CIHR. I'm not sure if that's worthy of another meeting, if it's worthy of asking them for a response to something like this, but I'm just using my time to indicate that I think it would be very relevant to have CIHR indicate some of their capabilities of housing something like this. I want to get to medical tourism, but I just think of young girls right now, and from your guys' testimony, like it's scary to think that, not on the reconstructive but more on the cosmetic side, like where the heck do they go to get information? What do they do? You know, your organizations are doing good work and trying to get that information out there, but you know, at the end of the day, I would think that, you know, the government of Canada should have some resource or some role in providing that to again, you know, someone who's considering going down this path, and a lot of the concerns that have been raised at meetings that we've had so far. But on the medical tourism piece, and maybe I'll if I have time to go to all three, it would be great. But I'll probably start with you, Ms. Pratt, if we could. I guess help me kind of circle this with the registry. So I see the tourism. You go down to, let's just choose Columbia. You go down to Columbia. You get an implant put in. That implant has the problems or issues that we're discussing here at committee. Without the registry, I would assume how it's being discussed isn't necessarily tracking that implant in Colombia. Colombia doesn't have a registry, so how does that then circle back to the registry that we would like to see put in place here in Canada? So, as Terry had mentioned, I think it was Terry, there should be an option for them to register themselves, but there has to be awareness. Health Canada has to take a more leading role in making sure that this kind of information is available. Canadians should be able to get that information off Health Canada's website. So, and there needs to be an outreach. Yeah.
Discussed is immigration. So I've dealt with many immigrants who had their surgeries done in their original countries, but now they've landed in Canada. And so those patients, is there not an option somehow for them or a physician to upload that data? Because when I'm having patients who are Colombians who are immigrating or in the effort to immigrate, those patients are now deathly ill, but having to, in my personal experience, they had to fly back to Colombia for their surgery. And so anyway, I just wanted to mention that we have this immigration cohort that hasn't been discussed yet. So.
And then I guess 10 seconds. Madame Elliott, if there's anything to add on your point.
Tourism, my opinion goes in the ways of Terry's. When a patient comes back, right now what's very trendy is those women that are going to Morocco or Turkey more than Colombia. If I'm talking about Quebec, those patients go Morocco, Turkey. And when they come back, a lot of them, I cannot give you a percentage, are coming back with complications. And the cost of it comes back to our healthcare system. They spend that money outside, which is okay because it's medical tourism. It costs them $4,000. They have a trip. They go see sightseeing. They get breast implants, something else. They come back, and they have complications. They're sick. They have breast implants that are unknown. So for the surgeons that are, having them under their care here in the medical system, it's a puzzle. It's a problem. So if you go, there should be something, I don't know how. I mean, I'm not a business person at that level. If someone comes back there should be a way to track those surgeries to help, the healthcare professional when they come back, and for those women to have those implants tracked. If something happens in the country of origins of those implants, how will those women know what's happening with those implants? If they keep them, because in my group, we have so many women coming in because a few days later or months or weeks, they have all kinds of problems with those implants. And they have mesh inside, and they have long sutures, and
Thank you.
So many problems.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Elliott. Next, Ms. Suds, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to all three of our witnesses for being here, for sharing your experience, your expertise, and the work that you're continuing to do. Obviously so crucial as we attempt to tackle this study. I wanted to pick up on two things. The first thing I wanted to go back to was from yourself, Ms. McGregor. You had mentioned a list of, I believe it was 3 recommendations. And the first one that I think I caught was adopting breast MRI surveillance. Can you speak a bit about what that should or could look like and the impact that you believe that would have?
Right. So I can tell you for me, my surgery was in 2009, and my surgeon did say, Terry, these should last around 10 years. And I made a mental note saying, file save another 10 grand, Terry, because in 10 years, you may have to get theirs replaced. But I also know as a Canadian woman, every 10 years I have a different thought and belief system because I've evolved. And so I actually thought, well, I might just want them out because maybe in my 50s I don't want these things. And I think I'm typical. And so what is devastating to me is that somebody in Canada, whether that be Health Canada or the manufacturer's inability to get that information to Canadians, and including my implanting surgeon, nobody told me to do anything until I had a problem. However, that is completely contradictory to all the manufacturers, all 4, I think there's 4 manufacturers who are licensed in Canada. Their own label says that we are to get implant surveillance, and there's some debate on when. Right now, the FDA standard is after your 5th year of surgery, you should be having your first preventative maintenance. To me, this is no difficult than your vehicle. We have preventative maintenance for these implants because that's when these things like silent ruptures and gel bleed and intracapsular and extracapsular ruptures could have been identified sooner. So the fact that I do believe it comes down to the fact that we have a lack of private MRI resources, and I don't believe that our government should be paying for an MRI for an elective surgery that I had. So I think the problem is we don't have private pay MRIs.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very insightful as we look to recommendations as the report is complete and written. So thank you for that. I had another question on that vein, but I know I have limited time, so I'm going to go to my other point. As you were, all three of you were speaking, but in particular yourself, Ms. McGregor, what came to mind to me is obviously the role of the plastic surgeon in the industry, so to speak, the profession in this. And, when you made the comment slightly offhand, half marketing, half medical. And I get it. I've seen these sites, and you're very accurate in saying it in that way, which leads me down the road of, what further should be done, whether it's regulations or whatnot, whether that's at the government level or at a association or a professional level, that could better keep track of and hold plastic surgeons responsible. And I'm taking the registry slightly aside from that comment because obviously that's under discussion, but there seems to me there's a bigger issue at hand here. And I'm wondering if, and I'll open the question to others as well, what recommendations you have there to hold these professionals to account and to a higher level.
That's a fantastic question. I've asked that question to the ASPS, the American Plastic Surgeon Association, when I have landed on websites that are so dangerous, literally dangerous to patients. And I will tell you that I had sent off a request to ASPS and asking, what can we do about this? Because this doesn't represent your organization with any credibility. At the time, and it may have changed, but I was told that since I didn't have an MD behind my name, I was not able to complain about any misleading information. And so at this point, I would tell a Canadian consumer today, whether she's a breast reconstruction patient or an augment patient, this is buyer beware. And those very pretty, glossy, half medical, half marketing, the information that is dangerous is what's misleading through omission. It is literally a selection of omission and wordsmithing. And that's where personally, I spent 3 years on and off Health Canada's website. Health Canada's website was a major decision-making tool for me. And it was why Health Canada became a target after my diagnosis, was because I wasn't an impulsive 20-year-old. I was in my 40s. And the fact that Health Canada had chosen to withhold that information to me was unacceptable, because I thought that was my oversight safety. And the first time somebody said to me, well, Terry, you never went to the FDA's website. And my mouth dropped, because it would never occur to this intelligent woman as a Canadian to go over to the FDA and to the States to read about breast implants. I didn't even give me a thought. So.
Thank you, Ms. McGregor. Suite, Monsieur Thériault, pour 2 minutes et demie.
2.5 minutes, Mr. Thériault. Miss Elliott, if we can't rely on industry, because if we can't rely on the surgeons, if we don't know if they're really getting informed consent in a uniform way from their patients, we can rely on your organizations, but that's not enough. Do you not feel that it is up to Health Canada that's responsible for testing whether a product is safe or not, if there are risks associated, if a product is at high risk? We have to use a precautionary principle, which says that that you have to be cautious. Do you believe that Health Canada, since 2019, has improved in this respect? Because it is now being compared to the FDA. My answer to you is no, it's not enough. The fact that Health Canada has not improved the way it does business, I can give you two examples. On the manufacturer's sites and on the FDA websites, they recommend to women who have implants to 3 or 5 years post-surgery to have an MRI. This information cannot be found anywhere on the Health Canada. We're not talking about a mammogram. We're talking about an MRI. So it's only the FDA website that talks about it. It's a suggestion that the manufacturer means. But why do we find this on the Health Canada website? Another example that I'd like to give you is a little bit more personal, but you'll understand. In 2021, Health Canada talked about BIA, ALC oversight. Yes, that's lymphoma associated with breast implants. I was contacted by a woman from Health Canada. I don't have the email before me now. She asked me if I wanted to revise their text or their blog. I'm a patient. I'm a patient advocate. I don't have an MD after my name. And I was asked to review the PDF file that Health Canada was going to put on their blog page. And there were mistakes, major mistakes in it. And I was the one they asked to review it. They didn't ask for a specialist, an expert to look at it. They asked me. And yet there's a scientific advisory committee. There were errors. It was said, they said that BIA was only associated with textured implants, but that's not true. There are other implants that can cause BIA, ALCL. So you need to warn people, patients who are undergoing reconstruction surgery, that this is the case. So is the Health Canada website sufficient? No. Perhaps the FDA website isn't adequate enough if you compare the data, but there's so much work to be done by Health Canada. And if we want to implement the precautionary principle, thank you. Thank you.
For 2.5 minutes.
Sorry, Ms. Pratt, I wanted to follow up where I ended my last set of questions. We've heard of the linkage between breast implants and 3 major conditions, the BI illness, the BI ALCL, in other words, the cancer that's associated, and autoimmune disorders. In your view, how clear is the evidence of those illnesses linked to implants?
I think there's absolutely no doubt. And I think we're asking the wrong question. I think the question isn't BII real, for instance. We've seen since implants were introduced in the 60s that within a year, those symptoms were already being manifest. So through decades, 6 decades, wearers have developed the same symptoms. The question should be, from my perspective, how did the industry so masterfully convince individuals who are medically and scientifically trained to buy into their narrative that, I mean, it should just make sense that when you're implanting a device that has chemicals inside, and those chemicals the silicone doesn't stay encased in there. And as I said earlier, it's certainly not inert. as I can attest for what I feel in my body. So I think we're asking the wrong question. It's how did medically and scientifically trained people become so willing to step out of what is just common sense?
Let me tell you why I ask. I ask because if there's a clear link between this, at least when it comes to cosmetic applications, I'm asking the theoretical question, should we be allowing the sale in Canada of products that are clearly linked, they're carcinogenic, and they are linked to other very serious illnesses, given those health concerns? Why are we allowing that product to be licensed and sold and implanted in people in Canada if that link is established?
I think that's a great point. And I think until they've addressed the issue of migrated silicone and its impact, and again, I can tell you, I live with the impact of it daily. I'm in pain 24/7 from the silicone in me. So I think until they have sort of addressed the inconvenient truths of breast implants, there should be a pause. I don't feel they should be available until they've taken appropriate action.
Thank you, Ms. Pratt. Next, Dr. Kitchen, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here and sharing your stories with us and helping us as we move forward on this. And I realize I've got such little time and I've got so many questions I want to ask, but I'm going to apologize to you all right now initially, because what we've heard today is basically a conversation on talking about where we've talked about CIHR and the studies that the registry that they have. And so I'd like to, Mr. Chair, to propose a motion that we extend our meeting one more day to hear from CIHR on their orthopedic registry, such that we can have that information here. And I do see around the table, I think there's a lot of consensus to that, so I'm hoping that we can very quickly get approval for that.
All right, so the motion is in order, and it is to extend, it's to add a meeting to this study for the purposes of hearing from CIHR. So the debate is on the motion. Dr. Hanley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Greetings to everyone. I think there may be some confusion between CIHR and CIHI. My understanding, and I stand to be corrected, but my understanding is that the orthopedic registry is actually with CIHI, Canadian Institute for Health Information. So can we just get clarity on who holds what and who has already appeared, and then sort of revisit what our need is? Thanks.
Okay, Dr. Kitchen and then Dr. Ellis.
Just quickly, I mean, if that's okay, it's a friendly amendment. I think just for clarification, if it is CIHI or CIHR, I think I'm comfortable with that.
We've heard from CIHI. Dr. Ellis?
Thank you, Chair. I guess I think that the new information that's come to light is to really understand how we can move this forward, which to me makes sense to hear from whichever government agency it is to say, you know, how much is this going to cost? What does the orthopedic registry cost, et cetera, if we're going to use it as a template of how to move this forward. I guess in deference to the witnesses, the issue as I see it is this hasn't been moved forward in 20 years. This has been coming here. And this is something that I think hearing from a government agency that may or may not be responsible for this, to me is important and germane. Thank you.
Dr. Hanley?
Yeah, so given that it's CIHI and we did already hear from CIHI and Health Canada, and some of those very questions were posed, and we did hear their opinions. Now, perhaps in light of all that we've heard, we may want to revisit that. certainly open to that consideration, but it would be, or perhaps there are other witnesses within CIHI who might speak to that. But just to be clear, that they have already appeared and spoken to this issue.
Are there any further interventions? Mr.
Ben,
Genereux and
j'aimerais ça,
then
Monsieur
Mr.
le
Thériault.
Président. Ah, je pense que
Mr.
c'était à moi.
Genereux? Oh, Mr. Thériault, allez-y.
J'aimerais juste ça.
I would just like, in the translation, sometimes when you use an acronym, I'm not sure which organization you're referring to. So let's name in full the institution that we want to hear, so we know exactly who we're referring to.
Donc,
So the motion was for the CIHR. And I don't know what the CIHR is in French. Does anybody here know what it is?
Institute of Health Research is what's in the motion. Mr. Genereux, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So the Canadian Institute for Health Information, en anglais, for Mr. Thériault. If it's them coming again, or if in light of a lot of where the conversation has gone, I think even open to if the sponsor of the motion is open to it, having them submit on something. In light of a lot of evidence that we've heard over the course of the last little while, a submission on if this is something like they've taken some extra steps, maybe since hearing from a lot of the patient advocates, but also a lot of the surgeons as well. I'm not sure if it's within the committee's right to I don't want to say demand any sort of information request, or if it's politely ask them if they could submit something. If there's a way to do that, I think because of all of this, I think getting their information more on the record will help us have a better report, rather than their first intervention on this when they came and it didn't have a lot of the information that we have now today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm agreeable to that. I think the intent here is to get, because when we heard from them before, we did not get that information, to know exactly what the registry entails, what the questions were being asked, what the questions that they may be asking of the patients, and having them provide. If that can be done in writing, I'm agreeable to that, as opposed to having them attend another meeting if that would be the case.
Any further interventions? So the motion is actually to invite the Canadian Institute of Health Research to appear. So are we ready for the question? All those in favor of the motion, Mr. Genereux.
Sorry to complicate things on you, Chair. Can I make an amendment then to this? To have the Canadian Institute of Health Information provide their response to testimony as it comes to the registry. I guess I'm looking at the clerk if this is in order or what, if we can do that. I've never, I guess, compelled somebody to testify before, so I'm not totally sure that's right. But I guess in essence, Canadian Institute of Health Information provide, in light of a lot of the testimony that's happened over the course of the set number of meetings, additional information on the capabilities of a registry within their organization.
The amendment so substantially changes the motion that I'm going to suggest that the original motion either be withdrawn or defeated, because the original motion was to invite the Canadian Institute of Health Research to appear. The amendment is to invite the Canadian Institute of Health Information to submit a brief. So I just see it as being so different that it isn't really an amendment. It changes the whole character. I know we're trying to get at the same information, but the manner is so different. So how do you wish to? Okay, can we have unanimous consent to withdraw the original motion? Everyone okay with that? All right. So now we have a new motion to invite the Canadian Institute of Health Information to provide a written response to the testimony that's been given. Is that it in essence?
Yeah, and I think that exact wording, and want them really to focus on within the housing of the registry within their organization.
Okay. Okay, everyone understand the question? Mr. Johari.
Okay, so MP General, are you specifically asking what the current capabilities of the CIHI is as it relates to the registry?
Through the chair. Yes, because they house the orthopedic joint registry, we've heard so much testimony on this that people say, well, if you can do that, why can't you do this? So, yeah, so if that's more clear.
That's all I want. Thank you for clarification.
Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor of requesting that information from CIHI, it's unanimous. The motion is passed, and the floor goes back to Dr. Kitchen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate that. And I apologize to all three of you for that, but it's procedurally we need to get that done, and I appreciate that. Which then brings me to we've heard a lot of conversation about the report from Health Canada and reports where patients are to report issues to Health Canada, and as well as surgeons to be providing that information, such that we have that safety, that approval, those warnings, that they could possibly put that out. My question, I guess, is what I'm hearing from you is that Health Canada isn't the organization that should be doing the registry. Am I correct in that? I'll start with Ms. McGregor.
The political and infrastructure of this is beyond my scope, but if I can just simplify it, if Health Canada's mandate is in the safety of our population, their mandate is an oversight. And what I know is that, we get called in to state the problems, but we have solutions. But unfortunately, we never seem to be invited into the discussion table. And I'll use the CSPS. I've been called in the media Canada's leading expert on BIA ALCL, and whoops, I forgot to go to medical school. And I say that because when, it's fantastic to stand in front of a podium and speak at a medical conference. I've co-authored 2 articles with Mark Clemens, and yet when I heard that there was a working group for BIA ALCL of National Canadian Plastic Surgeons, and I asked if I could simply attend a meeting and share the real-world evidence, because these Canadians were finding us on social media and in our cancer support groups, and to be denied. I don't want to just present. I want to be part of. And when the CSPS National BIA ALCL Committee of Physicians won't even invite us to the table, because I want to let you know what's happening with these 60 Canadians.
Thank you, Ms. McGregor. Ms. Elliott, do you have any comments on that?
If I have time, I'm going to leave it to Terry, if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Pratt?
I don't. I'm not an expert on that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And so one of the things, as a practitioner, when I first started out in practice, patients came to me, it was the fact that they came to see me, that was consent. And then over time, it came to a point where I had to give consent in a written form to my patients. So they would write, and I'd show them in writing, this is consent for treatment. And then it became informed consent, where not only would I show that to them, but I'd also having them to sign that. And that's, as you see that, we see those progressions over the years, and that going back 30-some-odd years of practice. But ultimately, we see those things. Ultimately, when we talk about practitioners providing that consent, or basically that information to patients and receiving the service, I'm assuming that we're still seeing that aspect, or we're seeing that same progression for is that correct? Would you agree with that?
I mean, as far as informed consent, and I guess I would just remind everyone, this is an elected surgery. This is not a life-saving device. So in the other place that we're seeing these patients having to make consent, our reconstruction patients are making these decisions in the middle of active breast cancer. So I'm going to just defer to Julie for the rest of that.
Yeah. So when a patient right now, if a patient goes into a surgeon's office to get a breast augmentation, the informed consent that they have in front of them, most of the time, it's about the surgical part of it. Rarely anesthetic, rarely there's going to be, so you know that you may have systemic symptoms, or do you know that there's a slight chance that you can get BIA cancers? Rarely. Most of the time, it's about the surgical complication, outcome, mechanical complications, and all the part about anesthesia, and that's it. That's the informed consent that patients have these days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just if I could very quickly, just
that's all you have.
Could I just ask you if you would provide to the committee your thoughts on what should be included in the registry? That would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No problem at all. Dr. Pelosi for 5 minutes.
Yeah, now, my understanding is in 2019, Allergan issued a voluntary recall of its breast implants. Well, maybe I got this all wrong here, but I went to the Health Canada website. There is a recall policy for health products. I would have thought this would apply to breast implants. Correct me if I'm wrong. But it requires that a responsible party, which I assume is Allergan, that they're expected to take action in a manner that is prompt. They are expected to have a recall procedure, and they're expected to maintain distribution records that allow tracing of the devices. So any of you out there, and specifically Ms. Elliott, I think you said that there were 15,000 people in Quebec who had implants, and a lot of them hadn't been contacted. What exactly did Allergan do? Maybe I'm wrong on my interpretation of the medical devices regulations in our recall policy for health products, but it would seem to me they have an obligation to be doing that. What if anything, did they do, to your knowledge? I know they're not here, but you can say from your perspective.
So my perspective is from the experience that I get from having a group of close to 2,500 women in Quebec. There's a few dozens that have textured devices that should have received some kind of information about the fact that their implants were recalled. There's very few of those patients that did receive texture implants as part of a reconstruction post-mastectomy that did receive a letter from their healthcare center where they had their surgeries. But it's very few of them. And I asked those women, I asked the women in my group, if you do receive a letter, please let us know. We want to know how many of you got that letter. And I think that all of those patients, there's only one that got textured implants for aesthetic reasons only, not part of a reconstruction, that got a letter from, I don't remember if it was a plastic surgeon or Allergan, but there was only one. So, of course, not all women with breast implants or texture breast implants are part of the French-Canadian group. It represents only a small portion of, the women with textured implants and breast implants in general. But it's really a minority who were contacted, and close to 0% were contacted by the manufacturer to let them know that they had defective device implanted.
Maybe, do any of the other witnesses know of whether women who received these implants were contacted by the manufacturer themselves?
Right, I can answer that. Public commentary from manufacturers, specifically Allergan, says that they have taken robust, I believe was the term they used, activity to try and contact us. And what I know as a patient, whether I'm a smooth, silicone or saline, smooth or textured, implant manufacturers have very robust warranty data. And if you look at my Canadian device registry, it was a dual purpose. It also was their warranty. And if what I can't and do expect an answer from is exactly, we can't get an answer on exactly the Canadian sales and distribution teams for Allergan and Mentor, exactly what actions did they take to reach out and contact women. That answer has landed on crickets. And what I can tell you, this committee will be receiving a copy of my 2009 Canadian Device Registry. The black box warning at the bottom of my registry specifically sets that responsibility with Allergan, and that Allergan will contact me if there's a safety, efficacy, or performance issue. Now, why cancer didn't raise somebody's alarm bell to say that was a material change, and that's what I wanted to know. Who was the trigger for that? Where's the trigger point from Health Canada to get them to issue those warnings?
Well, I'd like to jump in there, because according to the recall policy for health products in the Health Canada website, it says that the regulatory operations and enforcement branch of Health Canada monitors recalls and assesses effectiveness of responsible parties. It also says, should a responsible party fail to effectively conduct a recall, that the branch may take compliance and enforcement actions. To your knowledge, did they take any such action, and have they monitored this recall?
And that was part of our recommendations. What consequences has that department levied on these manufacturers who have completely defied any of the conditions that are legislative or laws put in place to protect us? So thanks for the question.
Thank you, Ms. McGregor. Mr. Abultayev, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. I have 3 short questions for each one of you. You can answer, and then one question. How would you rate the quality of information you receive when consulting with professionals pro-operation? Start with Ms. McGregor.
Sorry.
How you rate the quality of information received from the surgeon prior to the operation?
What I would suggest is that surgeon is also motivated to sell me, and there's a lot of glossy products. And
I'm asking about the quality of information received. How do you rate it? Good, bad? Ugly. Ms. Elliott.
Quality of information about the breast
Received
implant?
prior to the operation.
About the actual device. Well,
the overall.
Good, better, and different.
So he told me, and I remember, do your homework. This is 2007, sorry.
Yeah.
What tool do I have in 2007? So I go on Google or whatever, and what did I find about that? Post-op complication. So I came back to him and say, well, slight chance I can die from the surgery. I can have post-op complication. And he said, well, you did your homework.
Okay. Ms. Pratt, please.
So I got my implants back in 1991, and I was told when I got mine that they would be lifetime devices, and the plastic surgeon actually said when I died, my body would decay, but my breast implants would be shiny new in the casket. And today, I would say that there's really mixed messaging when Canadians are going to consult with plastic surgeons about implants, even when a lot of them, not all plastic surgeons, a lot of them, when they do even advise a patient of the risks, they do a double talk and then say, oh, but the risk is really low. And so the messaging is not adequate.
If a loved one told you they wanted breast implant, how would you respond? Yes or no, please?
Run for your life in 2023.
Ms. Elliott.
You're putting your life at risk.
And Ms. Pratt?
Absolutely agree with Terry. Run for your life.
Do you, somebody said, out of the three of you, that registry is only a partial solution. Do you believe that there will be a risk-free implant at all?
No, I think that's asking for perfect world, and I don't think there will ever be a risk-free implant.
Okay.
What we're asking for is the transparency on the other flip side of that equation. Okay. We just want balanced information. I want to be an informed consumer and not the fooled Canadian that I felt like.
Ms. Elliott.
Can I speak in French?
Yes, indeed.
Of course.
Dentists at dentistry school learn that implants can cause lymphoma.
Ms. Pratt.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
The question is, registry only a part of a solution. Do you think we can run to a risk-free implants?
I don't see that happening. I think anything implanted into the body is at risk for complications, but certainly if they're going to be on the market, track them.
Okay. Final question. Health Canada roles was supposed to be information, responsibility, and liability. Health Canada need to provide information. We agree to that. Now, if the information is there, now responsibility. Who's going to be responsible of the decision whether to continue with the implant or not? Isn't the patient?
Sorry, I'm misunderstanding the question.
Yeah, me too.
Well, the question is, if the information is provided on Health Canada's website, and let's say there's a registry.
Balanced information.
Okay, balanced information.
Right.
Now, if the decision of the patient to go for the implant, who's responsible for that decision?
Ultimately, the consumer.
The consumer.
Yeah.
Ms. Elliott.
I'm not necessarily sure that my answer is gonna, anyways. Allergan and Mentor failed to provide long-term safety study on breast implants. Their long-term safety study were dropped after 3 and 4 years. How come breast implants are still on the market? So to me, that answered the question, because consumers right now in North America should not have to decide which brand, which breast implants. There should not be right now, with no long-term safety study done, breast implants on the market to choose from.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Elliott. And Mr.
That's it?
Abouteev? Yeah.
Thank you.
That's it. Ms. Briere, please, for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to the three witnesses. Thank you for testifying this afternoon, and thank you for sharing your experience and helping us go further with this file. I'd like to hear you talk about something else. How about transgendered women who represent a sizable group of people who receive implants? Do you have any data with regard to complications from that this group is experiencing? Obviously, I'm not a data center. My group is not a statistical center, but we do have good representation. I'm talking about my group, but I'm talking about our community in general, BIA, AICL. And I would imagine that the transgendered person who is susceptible to gaslighting more than anyone else, these are often women. These are often women who take hormones to help with their identity. It's a medical implant. It's a foreign body that's being introduced into the body. So transgendered women who have breast implants have systemic problems that result from these implants. Just the problem is if they raise this issue, as we have all done with our health care providers, most of the time they're going to be told it's your hormones that are causing this problem. And yet, just like non-transgendered women who have tried to get their implants extracted, they've had the same experience. So personally, I don't think there's any difference between women who are naturally born as women and transgendered women. They're experiencing the same problem. They're getting the same BIA. They're getting the same issues that we get. Thank you.
Something?
Add that ISIN, a global collective of women with BIA ALCL from around the world. Right now, there's about 250 of us that sit in a private Facebook support group because nobody else wanted us. Breast cancer said goodbye, and lymphoma said, who are you? And so we have 2 transgender patients, and I think one of them has like one of those transgender influencers, and she's been quite public with her story if you wanted more information.
Thank you. And Mrs. I don't see your Pratt. Would you like to add something about that question?
I don't really have anything to add other than I have heard that there are complications happening, and I would imagine they will have the same complications as anybody.
Thank you. Madame Elliott.
Miss Elliott, in an article produced by Radio-Canada, you said that the doctors should give information to patients and with respect to the register, how do you feel about a registry and having a card issued? I just want to make sure I've understood you. You're saying that the card would replace the register? Well, a card can be, it can get lost easily. You can have your wallet stolen. Well, we're told to keep these cards on us in case of an accident or whatever, but a document would never, ever replace a registry. The paper form may be useful for provinces such as Quebec, where the file can be destroyed after 5 years following the implant, but a registry would resolve all of the issues, whether it be a card or registration or a destroyed medical file after X number of years. And medical files are destroyed. They're kept for a duration of time that varies from province to province. And as I mentioned earlier, if I have health complications, I'm not going to go back to see my surgeon unless a woman has mechanical problems. Rarely will she ever go back to her plastic surgeon. And this often happens after 5 or 10 years. So often, plastic surgeons, well, if they haven't seen the person after a few years in Quebec, the file will just disappear. It's not traceable anymore. So if you have a registry, you can call the manufacturer. But the problem is that often patients don't recall who the manufacturer was. They don't remember the type of medical device they had implanted. Most of the time, they won't even remember about the texture of the implant either. Mr. Terrio, you have 2.5 minutes. Yes. Dr. Morris feels, when it comes to the registry, that if we didn't make it mandatory amongst surgeons, it would never work. He thought, I just want to get rid of any confusion. I do understand that you want a mandatory registry, and that it would include surgeons, manufacturers, but you do agree that there be an opting out for women. Should a woman decide that she doesn't want to participate, would you agree with that? Is that have I understood you correctly?
I'll agree, mandatory, but I don't feel that I'm in a position to say perhaps there is a 1% reason. Breast implants are a very personal choice, and what I know from most Canadians is, there are people in this room who have acquaintances in their life who have breast implants that you don't know about. Our culture is very, very private. We do not want to discuss that. So is there a percentage maybe that don't want to be in? I don't feel that I'm in a position to say those women don't deserve it.
En fait, c'était plutôt de dire...
Rather, an opting out clause rather than an opting in clause. So we would say that all women would be registered, but if they don't want to participate, they would have to opt out. It's not about why they want to opt out, but to consider that all women would be participating in it. And if there is a case for some XYZ reason that they could opt out. So you agree with that principle. Okay. Thank you. Now, the form, given all of the problems that you have described today, Health Canada should come up with some type of consent form, a proper form, a prototype, where we will see all of the information and ensure that the signature of both the surgeon and the patient is present to show that there was, in fact, informed consent and that the patient has been informed about all of the risks that are associated with the procedure. Yes.
Briefly, if you can, please.
It has to be mandatory and it has to be uniform. The same format, the same questions, the same information for everybody. And there should be some consequences for those surgeons that don't comply.
Minutes.
Thank you. After hearing a lot of testimony, I'm still finding myself a little bit unclear about the state of research in this area. I'm totally convinced, by the way, that the three illnesses are linked, and that we should act regardless based on the precautionary principle. But I'm just wondering, in your view, Ms. Elliott, should the federal government provide targeted funding to support research related to breast implant illness? It would seem that if there is any confusion in the literature or in the profession among surgeons, that this should be resolved immediately by funding absolutely strong clinical trials and research to resolve that. My mind was going the exact same place my colleague, Mr. Theriault, was going, which is even if we don't have, crystal clear causative evidence yet. It would seem to me that based on the precautionary principle, Health Canada should require all surgeons to issue a standard warning that lists the possibility, at least the possibility of the 3 illnesses. Is that something that you think Health Canada should be doing?
Of course.
In the meantime. My final question is just on the gendered nature of this. This committee is going to be looking at women's health coming up as in another study. And I'm just wondering, I can't help but saying that, this has been going on since the 60s. I think you mentioned about cars having recall, and I think we do have a registry of implants for everything else. Is it possible that this reflects a larger societal issue about the way we treat women's health? By not taking women seriously, by denying their anecdotal complaints, by dismissing them, and by being so slow to act when we have clear ties?
It's hard for me to not jump out of my seat and answer that question. And I understand there's a hierarchy in medicine, but I will suggest that somewhere in this private practice industry of plastic surgeon, we see a hierarchy of medicine, of gaslighting female patients. And if anyone was ever to want to write a PhD or case theory, I would strongly suggest we use private practice breast implant surgeons as that cliche model.
Ms. Elliott, do you have a comment on that?
I'm going to express myself in French.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't want to be mistaken about the date. I think it was in 98. Health Canada fired a scientist who had been asked, and I provided you with the information in the addendum, a scientist. They fired a scientist who said that breast implants should be withdrawn from the market immediately, and Health Canada fired this person. And we have these Health Canada files that said that it should be on the thank you.
We started a little bit after 11, so we probably have 5 or 6 minutes left. Dr. Ellis has agreed to 2 more short rounds, so maybe 2.5 minutes from Dr. Ellis, 2.5 minutes from Dr. Hanley, and then we'll look to adjourn. So Dr. Ellis for 2.5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here in this interesting testimony. I just wanted to, I think it's essential, though, my colleagues talked about Health Canada requiring certain things for consent, but we know the consent law in Canada is between a physician and a patient. So that would present some difficulties. And the only reason I want to bring that forward is I think it's important that we not offer people false hope of what may or may not change. I think we need to live in reality here, and that's important. Just a couple of things on medical tourism and immigrant Canadians, people coming here from other countries, of course, who've had implants inserted. I guess I look at that, and that's going to continue to create a significant problem for all of us with respect to a registry, which means perhaps there is a requirement for that interim step. And I know my colleague, Madame Briere, talked a bit about this, of a card or an online registry to which people can obviously could put their information as an interim step, because we have no jurisdiction over physicians in other countries of how to make them become part of our registry. So I guess, do you have any thoughts about that? Would that make sense? What if we compelled the manufacturers to have a website which then women could enter their information? Yes, I had Allergan XYZ. It was a textured silicone-based implant, et cetera. At least that would provide some protection for folks coming here to understand what may happen. I just quickly, if you could, if your comments on that.
I just don't think it's difficult to, how we get that information to the patient, I don't know, but that patient should simply have an upload option. I really don't think it's that complicated.
Manufacturers are manufacturing serial numbers. They have lists of those serial numbers. They can divide those lists per countries, per province or states, per cities, per buyers?
And Ms. Pratt, through you, Chair, if you would, short answer, please.
I think you're on mute, Ms. Pratt.
Sorry. I really don't have anything to add to that. I would agree with Terry's comment.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. The last short round of questions will come from Dr. Hanley.
Thank you. And first of all, I want to thank the three of you for appearing today. It's one thing to go through the personal experience. It's another to tell the story of that and to be an advocate. And you've each done that in amazing fashion and have for many years. So thank you. I want, in the interest of time, just to zone in on a couple of questions. Ms. McGregor, you mentioned, I think you referred to the sort of the impulsive 20-something-year-old. Do we have enough filters to limit or to, in this age of, cosmetic aesthetics, surgery availability, influence of industry, are too many women getting led into implants without enough information? Is there too much societal pressure, I guess? Can you comment on that?
That's difficult. I guess I was referring to myself as general. In my 20s, I made decisions differently than I did in my 30s or 40s or 50s. As far as the influence, maybe Julie, I'll let you pick that up.
If I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, manufacturers of cosmetic products, aesthetic products, are not supposed to do direct marketing to consumers. Yet, if you go on Instagram, there's direct publicity for Botox or breast implants. And who's on Instagram and TikTok? And you see that 20-year-old, and there's a label, Juvederm, Allergan, Botox. So any 20 years old that sees, I can have access to breast implants or Juvederm is going to be attracted to that. So I think that whoever is in charge of looking at that particular issue should be looking at what's happening on social media right now.
Ms. Pratt, a final comment?
When I started advocating, one of the reasons I did was because my daughter, out of her group of peers, there were quite a few of them that already had breast implants or were considering them. And so they're sort of basing on when they get, implants to start, and they're really happy, and then they convince somebody else to get it, and Health Canada hasn't got the right information there. Manufacturers are showing them these, high gloss images. And so on Health Canada's website, they should have pictures of what does a lymph node with silicone look like? What does a really badly ruptured implant look like? They should be encouraged to consider, like a lot of them are even, like they're very health conscious, very environmentally aware, like of chemicals, but implanting chemicals within them. And I say this because I did it. That was me. I was like a fitness nut and I had these in me. So there can be a disconnect. And I think that manufacturers should have more responsibility, and plastic surgeons and Health Canada, for making sure that there's an awareness of the reality of breast implants, what can happen, what can go wrong.
Thank you, Ms. Pratt. And thank you, Dr. Hanley. To all of our witnesses, thank you so much for being with us, for sharing your personal stories, for your advocacy. We share your hope that what you have done here today will make a difference, and that's what we are all seeking to do. So thank you for doing your part in that regard. Colleagues, just before we wrap, you should be aware that the witnesses here today have submitted several supporting documents for their presentations, and we're still waiting for some translations. So once that's done, they'll be circulated as soon as possible. The plan for Tuesday was to schedule some time for drafting instructions on the breast implant registry. That may be premature given the motion that was adopted today. But if you want to start giving some thought to what you would like to see in the report in terms of recommendations, et cetera, we could possibly have a preliminary discussion on that on Tuesday. There will also be some time in camera for committee business so we can plan the agenda for the coming weeks. You will receive before Tuesday a summary of the studies that are currently underway and upcoming, as well as a proposed calendar showing a potential work plan. And finally, the documents from the PMPRB study are about 350 pages. They're still in translation. We don't have a firm date for when they will be available. That's it by way of updates. Is it the will of the committee to adjourn the meeting? Yes. We're adjourned.